بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب زدني علما.
Now here you can see we already discussed if you have down status, then most likely the problem here is we can these are the possible issues, and in case if you see administrator down, most likely the local port is in shutdown state. So if your remote port is in shutdown state, it will show you the status as down, and if your local port is in shutdown state, then you will see something like administrator down. Now finally, there is one more thing we need to know. Now sometimes you will see the status message as up and down. Now this basically means that the physical connectivity is fine, but the protocol is down. Now there are two possible reasons for this. If there is something called encapsulation mismatch. Now encapsulation mismatch means generally in the lease lines, we do have some kind of encapsulations, like on the serial links, default it runs HDLC encapsulation. But if I want, I can change to PPP. So let's say if I'm using a PPP encapsulation on one side, and if the opposite side is using a different encapsulation, just like different languages, communicating with the different languages, the link will not come up. So the most possible reason for a serial link up and down is the encapsulation mismatch here. So the encapsulation mismatch indicates that there is some problem with the protocol. So that is one possibility. Let's verify this. Probably what I can do is I can simply go ahead and make some changes to my topology. So what I'll do is I'll try to create some issue here. Like already it's running HDLC encapsulation on both the sides, HDLC and HDLC. If you want to check, I'm going to change this to PPP. So this will mismatch the encapsulation. So if you want to check, you can use a command called show interface S0 by 0 by 0. You can see the encapsulation is HDLC. So right now the interface is up and up. There's no problem. So once I make changes, like I can simply go ahead and say encapsulation, default it runs HDLC on the serial links here. I'm going to change to PPP. Now why we use PPP, you know, probably that's something you have covered in the CCNA basics. So I'm not getting into the individual protocols, what they are and how they work. So that is covered in a separate basic foundation section. Now once you do this, you can see the interface change state to down. So which means if I say show IP interface brief, now what I can see here is the interface is up, but the protocol is down. The status is up, but the protocol is down. Now the reason here, now we can go ahead and verify show interface S0 by 0 by 0. On the router 1, you see the encapsulation is PPP. But if I go and check on the router 2, let's go to router 2 and check. So on the router 2, so how to check show interface S0 by 0 by 0. Now here it is HDLC. Now either both the sides we should have either HDLC or PPP. So let's say my company decided to use PPP because it supports some additional benefits like authentication and not a proprietary like a standard one. So I just wanted to use PPP. Now once I change this to PPP now, that's what I did. So I've changed this to PPP here. Now you can see the interface change state to up. So if I come back and verify the status of my interface, the interface is right now up and up. And if I try to ping to the opposite interface, I must be getting a reply. So this is one possibility. Probably this is one thing you need to always check if there is any kind of, if you see any status message like up and down. The next possibility is authentication mismatch. Now here you can see there is something like authentication mismatch here. Now there are multiple things. Maybe authentication mismatch means maybe you have configured, you have enabled the authentication, but the keys are not configured. Like one possibility, maybe the keys are not present, the password, or maybe one side you configure, one side you did not configure, or maybe there is a mismatch of the keys. So we'll try to see all these options here. So the first thing what I'll do is I'll try to go on the router 1. We'll try to enable authentication because PPP supports authentication. Again, I expect you to know the PPP authentication configurations from the basic commands. So we'll go under the interface, and then I'm going to say that PPP authentication, let's say I'm using CHAP. Now, immediately once I enable this authentication, you can see the interface change state to down. Now the reason is, and if you verify the status message, it is up and down. Now the problem here is not with the encapsulation, because if you just remember, we enabled PPP encapsulation on both the sides. But the problem is I have enabled CHAP authentication on one side and opposite side I did not enable. Let's try to enable it. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll try to go ahead on the router 2. I'll say encapsulation PPP, and then I'll say PPP authentication CHAP. Now, even though I have enabled, and you can see still the interface is down. Now, the problem here is, so simply enabling the authentication is not sufficient. There must be a username and the password. So because here we have enabled the CHAP authentication, but we did not configure any username and the passwords, because you need to have a username and the password has to match. Those are the conditions, right? So let's try to configure the username and the password. So what I'll do is I'll try to go on the router 1 first. So on the router 1, we'll simply create a username. And the username, you should know the rules like username, where you must have that username, this one, the router 2. Now the username has to match. Like in my case, let's say I'm saying username and the password is, let's say, Cisco123. So the username has to match the exact opposite host name. So you know that basic rules. And on the router 1, we have enabled that. Okay. And likewise on the router 2 also, I need to create a username. Probably the username is like R1. And then I need to say password is Cisco123. So if I misconfigure the password, so there are few things you also need to check. Whatever you configure here, like in my example here, we need to make sure that whatever the username you are creating, it has to match the exact host name of the opposite router. And whatever the host name you are using here, the username, it has to match the exact host name of the opposite router. So these are the basic rules. And of course, the password has to match on both the sides. And again, make sure that it is case sensitive, even there is no spaces. These are the things we need to check. And if there is any misconfiguration of this, in that case also, this is not going to work. Like in my example here, let's say if I try to misconfigure, like in this example, what I'm doing is I'll just configure the password as Cisco. And if I try to shut down the interface and verify and make it up, you see the interface change state to up, but it should go down after some time. So you can see it is still up and up. You check the username, if the username is correct or not. So if you verify the interface status, sorry, this one, we have to check this one. You can see it shows up and down. And the reason is simple, because the password mismatch. So here we are using the password as Cisco, and here I'm using password as Cisco123. So make sure that when you are doing this, let's say in my case, I'm using router 1, and the password, yes, password has to be same on the opposite side. Now, once again, either you can simply go ahead and shut down the interface and make it up for an immediate quick. And if you verify show IP interface brief, what I should see is the interface should have come up. That's what I'm expecting. Now, once you shut down the interface, now you should see the interface comes up again. So these are the few things we need to know. So probably you will see the same section in the basic CCNA level as well. But you need to really know the troubleshooting the WAN connectivity, because if there is any problem with the WAN connections, then on the top of it, we are going to run the routing protocol. So that's not going to work, because in our scenario here, we'll be running a routing here. And before you jump into the troubleshooting of the routing, we need to ensure that the WAN connection should be okay. And how we can confirm that? That we can confirm with the help of this specific show IP interface brief command. And based on the outputs, you can figure out what might be the problem, and you can go ahead and fix them.